That's an amazing
gun, Brandon. Chris Broussard back with us talking Bucks and Suns game 1 of the finals. Tip-off tonight. Both teams with a superstar in search of a first title. Giannis and Chris Paul. How do you say his last name, Brandon? Giannis. Give it to me.
Oh, Antetokounmpo.
Okay. There it is. Can the two-time MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo get himself healthy enough to come back and contribute in a big way? Meanwhile, for CP3, a title could cement his spot among the top point guards of all time. Chris Broussard, who needs an NBA title more for their legacy, Giannis or CP3?
At this point in time, it's clearly Chris Paul because of his age. He's 36. He's in his 16th year. He won't have many more opportunities to win a championship. This is probably his best remaining. Giannis is only 26 years old. He's got plenty of time to win his rings. Sure, it'd be great to get the monkey off his back. He no longer has to have that pressure of can he win a championship riding over his head during the rest of his career. But he's still got plenty of time. Michael Jordan was 28 years old when he won his first ring. LeBron was 27. So Giannis has time. Now, Chris Paul, if he wins a championship, he becomes, in my view, and Nick's view, and many people's view, a top 5 point guard of all time. I'd have him 5th on my list. I think Nick would as well. It separates him from John Stockton, Steve Nash, even Jason Kidd, who won a championship, but he did it later in his career as a role player with Dallas. This is the one thing that's missing from Chris Paul's resume. I know he hasn't won an MVP award, but not many small point guards have. We don't hold that against Isaiah Thomas. We all know he's better than Steve Nash, and Steve Nash won 2 MVP awards. So that's not really something that's held against Chris Paul. But this is a glaring miss on his resume, no title, because many of the games that they lost or series that they lost were largely on Chris. You know, as far as whether it was a bad turnover, a mistake here or there, a bad game at the wrong time, or even injuries. And so if he's able to win this championship, it erases all of that. Similar to how Isaiah Thomas, we don't even really talk about 1987 when he made the bad pass that Larry Bird stole in the Eastern Conference Finals, and Boston went on to win that series when Detroit really looked like they were going to win it. Isaiah erased that because he went on to win 2 championships. Chris Paul can do the same, and all those playoff failures in the past, they get pushed to the periphery, and we focus mainly on him being such a great winner, leader, and champion.
Yeah, no, I agree with you as CP3. For me, it comes down to narrative. When you talk about Chris Paul, the narrative totally changes. Now we have him in the top 5. A lot of people, I'm going to work off of Nick's top 5. You have Magic, you have Oscar, you have Steph, and then you have Isaiah Thomas, and then CP3. Now, there you go. For me, I think he's top 4, actually, because I would remove Steph Curry. Steph Curry, the game is different. We don't, it's just not point guard, shooting guard, a center. It's different now. This dude redefined how you play the point guard position, and you got to look at him as a shooting guard or just a scorer, or you come up with a different name. So for me, I go with CP3 because he's redefined, you know, his narrative. Now we're talking about him as a great leader, not a leader that, you know, sometimes people, you know, embrace it, sometimes they don't. Giannis, the reason why I'm not going with Giannis is too big of a gap in his game, too big of a void that he needs to fill right now. And I know Nick and Wilds, you guys may push back on me on this, but when you think about Giannis, I don't look at Giannis like a LeBron James, Wilds, or even a Kevin Durant where they're holding this weight like, oh, that guy needs to win the championship. Hell, just 2 series ago, we were talking about him. Everybody may not be the best guy on his team. He may be the number 2 guy on his team. We were talking about this guy and saying, oh, he don't have the game that can win a title with the guys around him as is. So, yeah, I got to go with CP3 because of all those reasons. Don't forget the conversations we were just having just 2 weeks ago.
So I like CP3 too, and here's why. CP3 has a long, accomplished resume, Nick. You know it. But it's easier to just roll off the tongue. Champion, winner. That's it. All the other stuff is nice. The way that we have to talk about CP3 now, all these lists of accolades, it's just easier to say champion. So I'm going to give you two guys. They've got a ton of accolades. They played 21 seasons. One guy made 15 All-Star teams. The other guy made 14 All-Star teams. One guy made 12 All-NBA. The other guy made 9. One guy scored 26,000 points. One guy scored 31,000 points. And I'm talking about Dirk and Kevin Garnett. And you know what you remember them doing? You remember Dirk holding the trophy, and you remember Kevin Garnett screaming, anything is possible, because they're champions.
That's right.
It defined their career. If they never won, we could run through, Garnett's Defensive Player of the Year and rebounding titles, and Dirk did this. We would do all this stuff to kind of maneuver and properly place them. It's just much easier, like, you know what? Those guys are both winners. They're both champions. It's the same way I want to talk about Chris Paul. That's why I think it's more important for his legacy.
So, and I'm going to be the one guy that says Giannis. So let me respond to all that. Then I want to bounce some things off Broussard.
Yeah, go.
So I think one of the reasons it's so important for those guys, Wilds, is because the great forwards, you do classify them as champions or not. Barkley and Malone are out on their own corner because they didn't win a ring, and that's the corner KG or Dirk would have been, but then they did. With point guards, that's not how it is. So, like, Broussard, people think Broussard and I... Listen, Broussard's like my grandfather in that we don't agree on many current events, but historically, I trust him implicitly. And so when we're talking about NBA history, when we're talking about NBA history, I don't think it's outrageous to say that Chris Paul has already passed Stockton, that he's already passed Kidd. That just by getting, that's as far as Stockton and Kidd got. I know Kidd won a title, but it's a different thing like you were saying. Kidd's best accomplishments were with the Nets, the New Jersey Nets, when he took them to 2 finals, like Chris Paul taking the Suns team to the finals. So I feel like Chris Paul is already better than Nash. He's already better than Gary Payton. And whether they win the ring or not, I can't put him ahead of Isaiah. Isaiah was the best player on teams that could have won 3 titles, did win 2. Right. So, like, I feel like Chris Paul, oddly, is almost, he's not going to go backwards, and there's too big of a gap for him to go any further forwards than I have him. You were saying I would have him in the top 5 if he wins it. I got him in the top 5 just for getting here. But what I want to bounce off you is Giannis. Because Brandon's right. He has holes in his game. My question is, if they win the title, does it matter at all? Because the resume will be bulletproof. Guys with 2 MVPs and a championship, it's 11 of the 16 best players in league history, and it actually, oddly, tells the full story of the league with a couple omissions. Bob Pettit won the first one, was the first MVP ever, was the player of the 50s. Russell and Wilt owned the 60s. Kareem owned the 70s. Late 70s, early 80s was Moses. Then Bird and Magic took over. Then Michael. Then Duncan to LeBron, and LeBron and Steph kind of had a shared era. Who are we missing? Well, Dr. J, who would be on the list if we included ABA MVPs, Akeem in the era when Jordan was gone, and obviously Shaq and Kobe, who a lot of people think Shaq certainly and maybe Kobe should have multiple MVPs. That's the story of the league in 15 names. If Giannis joins this list, by the way, guys, the youngest guys ever to win multiple MVPs and a title. He would be the 3rd youngest to ever check all of those boxes. I think only Kareem and Bob Pettit would have done it younger. He would have done it younger than everybody else. Like, to me, Broussard, when we're talking about all-time rankings, if they win this title and Giannis is really good, he's a top 20 all-time player. I don't know how you could argue even though it's like, well, he can't shoot, and like you don't go to him in crunch time. Okay, but he's done everything a player can do, and he's 26. Multiple MVPs, a Defensive Player of the Year, and a championship. And by the way, let me add this one last thing, and then tell me, not on a super team. The Bucks are really good.
Right.
But nobody looks at the Bucks as like, oh, my God. He's got, he has Kobe with him, or he's doing it with Kareem. They're a good team with an all-time player. If they win the title, I think he's a top 20 all-time guy.
No, you make up some interesting points. First, quickly.